So the evolution of the concept of luxury. What signals is demand giving to the world of architecture and real estate? What are the new trajectories still unexplored by the market? And let's hear a few words.
Il concetto di lusso sta cambiando negli anni, soprattutto applicato all'architettura e all'interior design, perché il lusso non è più l'ostentazione o la ricerca necessariamente di un prodotto che costa tanto, che vale tanto, che magari poi è soggetto alla moda del momento. Adesso ci rendiamo conto con i nostri progetti sia di ospitalità che di residenza che il vero lusso è avere non solo una bella architettura, una bella residenza, uno spazio bello, ma poter vivere delle esperienze.
Matteo, would you like to start?
Nothing to add. I think Elisa already anticipated what we think. It's all about craftsmanship. It's about what we in Italy can do. We can use our fingers. We can use our hands. So again, this is a fantastic opportunity. It is ceramica. It's about earth. And we are building with earth on earth. Thank you, Iris.
Gisella and Elisa, would you like to elaborate on the idea of the new concept of luxury and how you interpret it?
Yes.
It's okay. I think it goes.
It's okay? No. Sorry. Okay. So the new concept of luxury starts from the experience. That means that you need to have a beautiful interior design, but at the same time, the possibility of a comfort inside. We understood that now it's very important to, let's say, control and give to the resident, the guest, the possibility to have a good environment, quality of air, of light inside. So, of course, we need to find a balance, a well-done architecture, a well-done interior design, but at the same time, we need to be careful, because today, the well-being, the comfort inside is something that we need to consider from the beginning of our design.
Yes, thank you for this item. We can add that from engineering point of view, because in this conversation here we are, let's say, the technical expert or something like that. We may say that luxury and providing this kind of experience to the guests, to the people that will use these buildings, is something that requires a lot of work in the preparation of the design and the spaces, because providing a good experience is also providing a list of equipment and systems and study, and this will be something that needs to be accurately defined with the architect since the very beginning of the project, and defining from the beginning which is the targets and which is really the final experience that anybody can have there.
Sorry for interrupting. On my right side is Davide, and Davide is the man, Elisa and Gisella, you know it, cost saving and cost cutting.
The bad guy.
Yeah. The good guy and the bad guy.
Davide, don't feel under pressure.
Okay, so Matteo anticipate my incipit. So as the man of the budget, I have to say that luxury, money. It concerned money, but yeah. On the other side, I remember at the beginning of the 2000 years, we were all fan about the concept of fluid society from Bauman, and now we are forgetting everything, and we are trying to fix a concept of luxury. But actually, I was yesterday with a client, a wealthy client, and I asked him what he wants for his future apartment. And he answered me, you have to decide it. For me, it's enough. It's comfortable. And today I was with the students of YET here in Milan, and they made an interesting survey regarding what means luxury for the Gen Z. And yeah, the majority of them, as first answered the design, and then was interesting that the half of them answered also a mental break from the routine, a sort of a pause. And this is, I suppose, it's not something you can just put into defined edges and in order to say, yeah, luxury is this kind of things. So, yeah, it's difficult to say what luxury is one way, because, yeah, as I said, the most of us think it's about money, but the reality is that actually everyone has a different picture of what luxury is for him or her.
Davide, I understand from the client you met yesterday that he said location, location, location. Is that true?
Yeah, he was just interested in the location, so everything else was just ornaments to the location, and the luxury was actually indeed the location itself. So it's for him, yeah, just the same of we will plan a hut or a golden apartment because he's interested in living there.
So he copied Cesar Ritz in 1905 when they asked him why is the Ritz hotel in Paris the most important hotel in the world. He answered there are three arguments: location, location, and location. And that was, after all, our message as well.
Yeah, sure.
Well, it's for investor, it's all about location, location, and location. But then, right after that, it's design, design, and design. So I would put both of them on top of the list of priorities, let's say. Let's go on, if you wish, with the idea of simplicity and our second clip. Is it simplicity a universal concept? Are there general strategies applicable everywhere, or do they vary according to geographical and sociocultural context? Let's see what you said.
Il concetto di semplicità è un tema che ci è caro, e semplicità non è ovviamente banalità, anzi tutt'altro. Arrivare alla semplicità comporta spesso un percorso complesso per andare a togliere tutto ciò che è superfluo e non serve. Quindi la semplicità è un obiettivo della progettazione sicuramente. La semplicità a volte viene un po' fraintesa, soprattutto in alcuni contesti dove c'è ancora questa idea della ricchezza, del valore legato alla ricchezza. Quindi è vero che non è sempre uguale il concetto di semplicità. Se lavori a Venezia, se lavori in determinati contesti, a volte è più facile trasferire alla proprietà o al cliente l'idea progettuale di un design semplice, mai sopra le righe. In altri contesti, anche culturalmente diversi, c'è ancora l'idea che io a casa mia o se vado in un albergo voglio trovare tutto fuorché la semplicità, quindi un'ostentazione, una ricchezza.
Matteo.
Semplicità vuol dire ridurre, vuol dire sottrarre e non aggiungere. la giunta appartiene a quello che si faceva 100 anni fa. Noi guardiamo in avanti e non guardiamo mai indietro. Il nostro futuro non è minimalismo, ma qualcuno dopo il Salone del Mobile l'ha chiamato the Nippo Scandinavian style.
Is it also the lesson of Mies? Less is more.
Less is more, related to the 90s, is definitely a mistake. Minimalism is not what we are looking for. And Antonio Rodriguez already mentioned that we are looking for a poetic moment and not for the cool minimalism.
I like that. We'll be back on that topic. Gisella.
It's very interesting because when we were looking at the video before, it was mentioning the nature and something related to coming back to nature, which is very interesting because simplicity and nature basically goes together. And when we are helping the designer into developing a project and developing their idea, what the engineer tries to do is to try to find the right way to get there. So to combine the target of the project in their simplicity and provide the most easiest solution in terms of MEP, in terms of structure, in terms of essential, just to be able to provide the essential to what is needed for the scope of the architectural building.
Davide.
You mentioned Mies van der Rohe, and every time I heard the word of simplicity, I remember my professor of contemporary story from Ferrara, Savi, who asked me at the final exam regarding the book of Adolf Loos, if the right title of the book is Ornament and Crime, or Ornament is Crime. In Italian sounds a little bit better as in English. But yeah, I suppose that simplicity is always, from the point of view of the budget man, as you told me before, simplicity is not necessary saving money, because it depends on what the simplicity brings with. Because, for example, if we think about a simply earth wall and we are in Africa, it's okay. It could be also cheap or cost saving. But if you want to do the same wall here, the term of simplicity, the concept of simplicity stay the same, but here no one knows how to do it, and it costs. So yeah, I agree with Elisa, and I strongly believe that simplicity has to relate with location, and it's quite a tricky discussion, because it does not necessarily means that we are saving money. We are just allocating budget in something, and we are not doing something else.
Elisa.
In my experience, achieving a simple architecture sometimes needs to be very careful, to study from the beginning everything. And I agree with Davide, it doesn't mean that a simple architect costs less. The result often has behind a deep analysis of what you want to achieve, the way you have to work in order to achieve a simple solution. Sometimes it's easier, let's say, to use decoration and everything to cover and to hide something. The result, the simplicity is a result of a long study and analysis, and especially starts from the genius loci, the study of the historical and natural context. Where you are, it's important in order to define from the beginning your design.
That is another point I think we'll go back to after, but let's go with the next clip. Does customization rhyme with sustainability? What strategies ensure unique experiences, reducing costs and limited ecological impact from small to large scale?
La sartorialità per noi è imprescindibile e tante volte l'unico modo di fare sì che quello sia raggiungibile dal punto di vista anche economico è dalla base pensare a una cosa che possa cambiare, che sia camaleontica, ma che sia facile da cambiare. Per quello il nostro motto sempre di quello di mantenere le ossa e cambiare il vestito.
Customization, sustainability. Matteo, a few words on that.
I remember in the late 80s, in the beginning of 90s, we had a period where the style segmentation was really our main topic. Over the years, we changed. First of all, we understood that aesthetic durability, of course, goes along with technical durability. Durability is not related to style segmentations. Durability means you go for one solution. As an architect, you help your client to decide the right thing. It's one solution and not 5.
I think the issue of style is very important, and we'll go back to that. Elisa.
Yeah, doing a tailor-made custom architecture or interior design is of course our goal, and at the same time the possibility to develop something designed and using a craftsmanship is part of our DNA. So for this reason I totally agree with Matteo and Antonio, and the architect has to, let's say, not teach something to the client, but open the possibility and study the possibility to use, to reuse product of the site, of the place, and introduce something unique in each architecture. We don't have a specific style. For us, I don't know if Matteo agree with me, but each project is different. We start each project studying the site, but without a specific style in our mind. So we have every time the occasion, the chance to develop a different design. For this reason, I have to say that for us it's important every time to understand, to study, and then to start with the design. We don't have any specific style before in our mind.
Gisella.
Yeah, I can bring just one other details on that, which is not a detail, but it's part of the, let's say, the construction of this, because customization, flexibility means that there is a list of people, of stakeholders that are part of the process, which need to be asked, to be part of the decision, and need to collect a list of requirements of the projects. So this means that there is a lot of work in researching what the client wants, creating a good relation with them, and also to the other part of the team, which is normally for this kind of project, a very long list of people and a specific attitude they have and specific skill, because when you have to customize something and reach a certain level of quality of the final design, needs to put together a very long list of things and regulation, and so this means that there's a lot of work on that.
Davide, customization, what's your answer?
I come from a business where actually there's nothing but customization, because on the luxury hotellerie there's nothing that you can buy also in IKEA or in a so yeah, they already actually told everything, because yeah, the interesting aspect from my point of view is that every time I see that with the sorry if I came back to money every time, but with the same money actually you can achieve a really different solution in terms of aspects, in terms of materials, and in terms of also luxury feeling, let's say. So, yeah, I have nothing to add, because I also don't know anything but customization.
Next clip. Thank you. Contamination versus confusion. How can a project remain simple and rooted in its own identity without losing sight of new inspirations and global trends?
Il tema del viaggio è un tema importante nello studio Matteo. Siamo uno studio internazionale, quindi viaggiare fa parte del nostro quotidiano, e ogni volta che si torna da un viaggio ci si torna con un bagaglio culturale arricchito, un bagaglio culturale che comunque poi non viene perso, ma viene riproposto comunque nei progetti che vengono seguiti o che si stanno seguendo. Questo senza magari andare a distogliersi da quello che è la filosofia dello studio, del genus loci e della coerenza del progetto in dove vengono progettati o dove vengono seguiti i progetti. Quindi è una contaminazione che comunque ha un filone lineare che segue il progetto e segue quello che è la filosofia dello studio.
Matteo.
Mi sto chiedendo, dopo aver visto il film, se il nostro studio fa parte del greenwashing internazionale. Tutto il mondo parla di sostenibilità, tutto il mondo parla di salvare il pianeta Terra. Nel frattempo ci siamo tutti scocciati, ma profondamente scocciati, e non seguiamo più. Nessuno è più interessato ai disastri annunciati che la nostra specie umana va a morire se non facciamo questo e quest'altro. L'unica certezza che abbiamo oggi è che 1,5 gradi non salverà il pianeta, non riusciremo a tenere il limite che vorrebbero imporre i politici specialmente della ONU. Let me switch to English. I don't think as architects we can give a contribution. We are conscious that we can give a contribution, but we cannot really save the planet.
That's a strong statement. But architecture has a role.
Of course, we are in the direction of doing our best, but we are not able to preserve the planet. We need the help from everybody. Every single person has to give a contribution.
Shall we elaborate on that? Both levels.
It's hard somehow. I was thinking something different when you were talking about the trip and the travel and the value, because normally we try to respect where we are. So it's, for example, when we have some kind of project like the one in Venice, we have together in this in Langham Hotel, there is a lot of interesting in understanding and trying to find the best solution together with all the people involved. For example, the heritage and all those offices and officers that are part of the process. So it's not so easy to say that when you travel, then you can use the same methodology when you are, because you really have to respect where you are. And the first thing that we have to do to give, let's say, a reply to Matteo is to try to do our best and respect the place where we are. So that's the reason, because we have to respect not only the nature, but also the cities and the places and the people that live there. So that came in my mind.
Elisa.
I totally agree. We are, let's say, developing together this project, and of course we started from the place, but it's not, let's say, a statement. We need to be respectful. Of course, what Matteo said is completely true. We do our job, our daily job, of course. We will not save the planet probably, but if we try to do our best in order to save resources, to avoid waste of materials, and we do a good architecture, probably we give our contribute to, let's say, to do a small step in this direction. With the engineers from the beginning, we tried, it's something very simple, but we try to design, to dimension the technical plans in a proper way. Sometimes if you study from the beginning the insulation, I don't know, the layer of the walls and the massive property of the walls, you can save and reduce the oversize of a technical plant. And this is a little contribute, but of course it's part of the system. If we start from this, for each small project, probably we can have a better solution at the end.
And maybe more hope for the future.
Yeah, that's our small contribute to the topic that of course Matteo mentioned before.
And Davide, on the side of managing companies and investors.
Yeah. I have to admit that I agree with Matteo. The best solution in order to preserve or doing something better would be not doing anything in terms of new construction or also refurbishment, because obviously you always need new materials. New materials means new delivery, new production, and so on. But just to give up to you, Matteo, a brighter view of it, in the last time, you know, the rains in the north of Italy, especially in the Garda region, made several damages. And if you think about our zone in Salò, it was before, which the old fabric, the whole terrain was completely not permeable. And now that we are digging, we noticed that we save a large amount of water from the neighborhood, because it's everything in our holes. So at least we saved the neighborhood.
Thank you for saying that, because the big team in the office is really trying to follow the indication of the heritage. So heritage is not always our enemy, it should be our best friend.
I will connect to this and go back to something you said before, which was simplicity Be careful. Hello? Simplicity, not minimalism. Okay, so this is a very important statement. And it goes also on to the fact that detailing is very important. So I have seen that often minimalism was synonymous to poor detailing. Not a rule, but happened very, very often. While simplicity, it's strong detailing, and I think of architecture like, I don't know, masters like Alvaro Sido or Soto de Moura. You will look at their architecture, which is simple, but the detailing behind is so complex and so well thought. So I would copy simplicity and be very critical to minimalism. What do you think?
Perfectly right. One of our heroes is Soto de Moura, another hero is Jean Nouvel, another hero, there are so many heroes, and all these heroes follow the strategy of reducing. Becoming simple means a lot of work. That's why I want to thank the family surrounding. We are 80 in this office, and everybody is giving a fantastic contribution. From architects to interior architects to styling, we follow the Milanese school. The Milanese school means that if something goes wrong at the end, it's our problem, and we can't say it's the idiot from interior design. The idiot from interior design, that's us. So that's why we work very hard, and I want to thank this team. This team is really outstanding. Thank you.
Well. That's for you. Engineering has a very important role here to reach simplicity and quality. What do you think?
I think that my concern is, as they know, always is timing. Because sometimes when you want to reach something simple, you need time to reach it. Because as said, it's a list of things to control, it's a list to put in the right order, it's a list of things to be put together. So, because one thing that we mentioned before, the concept of luxury is also time. Having time to do things, to do experience, and also to have the time to develop the project. So at a certain point, this is now one of the most tricky part of the business. Doing the right thing and trying to be as simple as much as possible, and so but efficient in the right timing. And this is something that concerns me. And what I see in the project, that is starting with the ambitious target of timing, reaching anything fast and quick, but then things get slower because normally it takes time to get the right level of simplicity of this kind of things.
Elisa?
Yeah, but for this reason we have good project manager, no? No, I totally agree, because timing is, of course, tough. We have to struggle every day in order to keep the deadline, the handover, and sometimes the detailing takes time. I was thinking about the Japanese architecture, that it's made of very, very simple detail, wooden detail, but behind they have this study of the joint, of everything. So detailing needs time to be developed, to be studied, and of course should be part of our architecture. It's something connected to luxury, because if you have time, it's something that can be used in order to achieve a better result. No, it's not always like this, but we try to do our best in our timing.
So Davide, Matteo.
I'm just back from Japan. I have seen a phenomenal museum, maybe the most beautiful museum I've seen in my life. It's made by an architect group called Sana. famous for the Bocconi University here in Milano. They didn't show anything inside of this volume. After a while, you understand that from the ground, water pearls come up. And this water is moving in a certain direction. And that's all. People is fascinated, and the museum is really something you have to see. So simplicity takes time. To find the solution, probably the Sana architects worked for years and years and years. So I couldn't agree more. Gisela, you are so right. We need time.
Davide, your point on that.
Simplicity is so intended that something like a Occam razor, actually. I mean, you have to list everything you would have, and you have to choose. And at a certain point, you came to choose between things you want, and you just have to discard one because you can't have both in terms of, okay, money, but also time, but also space. And yeah, for this reason, I don't see such a cheap topic inside the work or concept of simplicity, because simplicity is trying to get the purest things, the purest heart of the thing, as Rodriguez said before.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's difficult to reach simplicity.
You touched the topic of style before, and I would like to go back to that for a moment, because there has been a time when it looked like mandatory to categorize architecture. You either had an architecture that was postmodern or high-tech or deconstructivist or minimalist or whatever. And at a certain point, these very different styles, but that all were international styles, which you could find everywhere in the world with few differences, capitulated in front of the empowering, I would say, culture of sustainability that brought back the idea that architecture has to be local. And then there is a genius loci to interpret the site. And then we rediscovered our history and tradition and went back to something which probably is a better way of designing architecture. Shall we concentrate a little bit on the idea of identity and genius loci against international style?
I think you already anticipated the answer. Isms, functionalism, rationalism, and so on, that's over. Isms, that was the period of star architects. We are not a star architect office, we are the generation after. Every project is facing a new reality. We have to start from scratch. That's, of course, a lot of work. Star architects, they had a style, they had a clue, they had a system. We have to start from scratch because every client and every location is different. That's what you call the genius loci. Genius loci means the soul of the place, the soul of the client, also in product design. If you work for a Chinese company, it's different than working for an Italian company. It's completely different.
Elisa, do you agree?
Yes, of course. We are, let's say, an international company, so we have a project in Korea. This year we started a project in Korea. We developed a competition in South Africa, a project in Venice, in Germany. So every place is different. You cannot think that you can put the same design, the same style everywhere. We need to be respectful and start from the analysis of the site. And sometimes you find the best solution in terms of construction from the local heritage and the local tradition of the place. The same for the probably structural or constructive perspective. For instance, we decided for the competition in South Africa to use these walls made of earth. That's something very special, and it's connected to the place, to the materials, and to the soul of the place. And it's not only an aesthetic choice, but it has a positive impact because you start from a massive wall, and so you have it's beneficial in terms of insulation and everything. So it's not only an aesthetic point of view, but studying the place and the local tradition is part of our architecture and constructive system.
Gisela.
Yeah, I can add something which is related to our experience as an engineering company working with not only with Matteo Thun but also with some other experience. And I may say that in the years, a list of strategies became a common practice, because we may say that sometimes architect used to be innovative, but to be honest, a list of ways to approach sustainability is common practice, and this is something that we need to be proud of, because thinking about using of renewable sources, some other strategies is something that now is common practice. So I think that what is more important, it's not more the style and how the appearance, detailing, or something like that. It's more about the story that any project and any architect can say about his project. So it's not only about the material or some kind of research, but it's what in the end each architect may say is the story about that project that came out in the end. So that's our point of view. If I may say something not so engineeristic.
Gisela, I have a question. Is it easier for you to work with a star architect when you know already what he's looking for? Do you hate us?
No, absolutely no. No, it's nice because it's a research that we make together to find the right solution, to find the right balance between timing, cost, targets, and it's very interesting doing that. So maybe it's easier doing something with those that already knows exactly what they want and have the already specific target. So it's more challenging.
You are very polite.
Sorry?
You're very polite.
I would say translation is, yes, a little bit. But we also love you. Davide.
I find actually a little bit old-fashioned still talking about sustainability. I think we have the ticket from the same party, number one and number two, of no protocol, no sustainability, no lead, and so on. And I find this topic a little bit old-fashioned, because nowadays it's quite ground zero.
It's given.
From where to start, yeah. And obviously, as Elisa told before, this kind of ground zero brings with him also the fact that you have to look where you are designing your building and trying to use the local know-how, because usually the local know-how bring with itself the ancient know-how.
Best practice.
So it means our ancestors looked perhaps more than we are used to, the weather condition, and so on. So sustainability comes naturally with it, without thinking about sustainability as a pillar of the project. And in this sense, let the architect be more freedom about planning.
Okay, so let's end this conversation on the topic of beginnings. Some of you said before how much the beginning of a story, of a project, is so very important. And so we're talking about the brief and the idea. Where do you start from? Just a few words on this to close our conversation. Matteo.
Fantastic conversation. Thank you for saying that, because every project is as good as the dialogue you have with the investor, with the client, with the management company. If this dialogue doesn't exist, the product doesn't work. So architects are always in dialogue with somebody. If this dialogue is good, you have a good result.
Davide, Elisa, Gisela, would you like to add something, or we close here?
I have to say that we start, each project starts from, let's say, every time is different, but often the site visit for me as well is the most important moment to understand the place and to start. And then there are Matteo's sketches, of course.
And we do the hard work because we need to make survey, to collect any information of any site. So engineers work on the backstage to try to prepare what is needed for the rest. So in the beginning is very important to focus on the real risk of the project, because you have to identify them and to be able to manage properly, especially if you have to face an existing situation, and maybe you have to starting understand how to keep them, how to build something new, considering the existing, maybe strategies in the site works, how to make it safe, any remediation or any kind of things you have to do before then the real job will start. So it's very important, the preparatory phase to get a good result.
Just to end, Gisela and Davide, thank you for being friends, because without friendship, there wouldn't be a good piece of architecture. Thank you.
I would like to thank you for your contribution, Davide, Elisa, Gisella, and of course Matteo. And I would like to thank everybody here of the team at Matteo Thun Partners, his family, his wife, my colleagues and team at The Plan that always create an incredible experience with the Architect Series, our partner, Iris Ceramica Group. The next episode of the Architect Series will bring us in Copenhagen at Ending Larsen. That will be beginning of September, so stay with us. Thank you very much.